name is Ji-Heng Lee. I'm the Senior Vice President for the Association of Community College Trustees. And thank you so much for joining us for our conversation today about the SNAP Employment and Training Program and community colleges. First, I want to do a special thank you to our friends at the Seattle Jobs Initiative for joining us today and providing us their wealth of information and content about this critical program. What we're going to be talking today about is ACCT is a partner in a project that's being funded by the USDA Food and Nutrition Service Program, and we are partnering with the American Public Human Services Association, APSHA, and the National Community Action Partnership, NCAP. So with that, I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Katie Brown, who is ACCT's Director of Government Relations, to get us going on this webinar.
Thanks so much, Ji-Heng. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Katie Brown. I'm Director of Government Relations at the Association of Community College Trustees. I'm going to be presenting on this presentation alongside my colleague, Jose Miranda, who's ACCT's Senior Government Relations Associate. And then, as Ji-Heng mentioned, we have our friends at Seattle Jobs Initiative joining us today, Susan O'Callahan and Bob Thibodeau. They're going to be lending us their expertise and talking us through the SNAP Employment and Training Program and kind of the critical role that community colleges can play in administering SNAP Employment and Training services. And you can go to the next slide, Jose. So just a quick overview of the agenda. I'm going to kind of just give a little bit more information about the grant that Ji-Heng was mentioning that we're participating in. And then from there, I'm going to turn it over to Susan and Bob for them to walk through the SNAP Employment and Training Program, provide an overview of the program, walk through, participants who are eligible, talk about funding structures. And then we are going to end with some next steps for you all and some takeaways. And then hopefully we'll have some active audience questions from you all that Bob and Susan can answer at the end of the presentation. So I'll take this time right now to remind you that if you do have a question at any point during the presentation, please feel free to use the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your screen, and you can type in your questions, and then we will be sure to either get to them during this presentation, or if we run short on time, we'll definitely be able to follow up with you afterwards. So just an overview of kind of like why we're having this webinar and why we're having this discussion today. So Susan and Bob are going to talk a lot more about this in a moment, but at a very high level, the SNAP Employment and Training, or SNAP Ent, is a program administered by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, or USDA. And the goal of the program is to help SNAP participants access education and training services that lead to regular employment. So USDA recently awarded a 3-year SNAP Ent related grant, which Ji-Heng was mentioning at the beginning of the webinar. And so we are working on that grant in partnership with APSHA and with NCAP. And the goal of the grant is to scale and strengthen SNAP Ent programs within community colleges and within community action agencies across the country. So through the course of the project, ACCT will provide technical assistance and training to a cohort of community colleges with the goal of helping them either begin offering SNAP Employment and Training services or improve the SNAP Ent services that they already offer. And in addition to that technical assistance, we also hope to develop like a resource bank consisting of SNAP Ent educational materials and best practices that we can share out with the community college sector as a whole. So we're still in the beginning and exploratory stages of this grant project, which means we've been talking with some community college leaders and some of you all on the call, and we're just trying to kind of gauge interest level and knowledge level across our community college partners about the SNAP Ent program. So this webinar is kind of the first step we're taking towards familiarizing community colleges with the technical aspects and benefits of the program. And then in the very near future, we'll also be deploying out a survey to some of our community college partners in the field to really glean, more in depth about where you all are at with SNAP Ent, and then kind of take steps that we'll talk about at the end of this webinar to continue the grant project. But with that, I won't take any more time because I would love, I want to turn things over to the experts. So I'll turn it over to Susan to get us started.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you everybody for joining us today. So I'm going to provide an overview about Snap Ent just to set some context, and then we'll go into how Snap Ent is a good fit with colleges. So all states are required to operate Snap Ent programs, and they all submit sort of their vision for what their program is going to look like, because it is a really flexible program and states have a lot of flexibility in how they design their programs to meet the needs in their population. And they do this through an annual plan that they submit to the USDA. This program, in recent data that we've been able to look at, that we know that the program is currently roughly about a $350 million program. That means that the USDA has provided that much in funding to states to operate Snap Ent, and we'll talk more later about what those funds look like and where those funds come from. And in 2018, Snap Ent served just under 458,000 participants. So it's a significant program that is benefiting a lot of people in this country. Next slide, please. So this slide kind of just shows the relationship structure of Snap Ent. It is administered by the United States Department of Agriculture, Food and Nutrition Service, and but it is operated and administered by state SNAP agencies. So they're departments of human services who run the SNAP program, also run Snap Ent. And they are the administrators and sort of the authority of the program, kind of reporting back up to the federal government. And in some states they do who administer SNAP on a county level. There is some county authority as well in those structures, but sort of largely the state is ultimately responsible for Snap Ent and then for administering and overseeing the program to its third-party partners, who could include colleges, community-based organizations, community action agencies, other employment and workforce providers in the community. Next slide, please. So I mentioned earlier the state plan. So every state is required to submit an annual state plan for Snap Ent that gets approved by the USDA. And what's in that plan includes their vision for and strategy for Snap Ent in their state, any growth and expansion that they're planning and what that looks like, the role of third-party providers. We're going to use this term a lot. Sometimes we'll say partners, sometimes you might hear provider, and the components or Ent activities that are offered through their Snap Ent programs. Snap Ent offers a whole array of different components, but states have the option to utilize any of those components, but it's their decision. They don't have to offer all of them. The timeline is really important for third-party partners because they are, as they're reporting up to the state, it has to kind of fall in line with the state's planning cycle. So Snap Ent operates on the federal fiscal year, which is October through September. The state submits their annual plan by August 15th for that October through September fiscal year. So that means that partners who are contracting with Snap Ent with the state, they are often called upon to submit their plans for Snap Ent and their budgets by June so that the state agency can then turn around and get that information compiled by August 15th. So this is just to kind of give you an idea of what that timeline looks like for providers. And then also plans can be amended throughout the year. And states are also subject to and sort of able to or have to operate within kind of their own local procurement timelines. So it's important to kind of consider all of those aspects when you're thinking about what's possible. And if you want to be a Snap Ent provider, these are sort of the cycles and the timelines that you need to consider. Next slide, please. So who is eligible for Snap Ent? Ultimately, this is a program for SNAP recipients, and then there's some just further criteria. So a SNAP recipient can participate in SNAP Ent as long as they are receiving SNAP in the month they participate, except for job retention, which allows for a SNAP Ent participant who becomes employed and perhaps they lose their SNAP because of their new income. They're still able to receive services through job retention in order to help keep that job. But then the other criteria include they may not be on TANF. So TANF is a disqualifying factor because of the fact that there's an employment service offered through the TANF program as well. So they can't receive TANF cash assistance. And then this is ultimately an employment program. So the goal really has to be employment at the end of participation. So we're really talking about individuals whose trajectory includes employment in their circumstances. There are no participation time limits for SNAP Ent or SNAP. So that's one thing to note that's different than other programs like TANF. And states have the option to make SNAP Ent mandatory for certain SNAP participants, or they can have it be a voluntary program. And that's up to states to make that determination. Next slide. So this is something that's important to consider in the college system. Because of the COVID emergency, the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021 has temporarily expanded SNAP eligibility for students. So we know there are rules around students and SNAP eligibility. This broadens that eligibility criteria to include more students to respond to the higher needs of and just higher rates of food insecurity among our population currently. And then of course, it's also good to remember that SNAP Ent is, so participation in SNAP Ent as a student exempts you from some of those student SNAP restrictions as well. And this temporary expansion just broadens the pool of eligible SNAP Ent participants. Next slide, please. So SNAP Ent funding kind of falls into three main buckets. We have 100% funds, which are awarded to the states based on a formula, and we'll talk more about that in the next slide. States can also get funds coming through if they are committing or pledging to serve able-bodied adults without dependents. There's a stream of funding that can come to states in order to prioritize that population who face kind of further like time limits on their SNAP benefits. And then there's the 50-50 funds, and we have them highlighted here because this is really where the opportunity is for third-party providers. And they're also the most flexible stream of funding because they can be used for everything that you use 100% funds. But in addition, you can also use them for supportive services, which are really often key to helping SNAP recipients succeed in their SNAP Ent activities. Next slide, please. So again, 100% funds can cover administrative expenses in SNAP Ent. So that can include staffing and planning, implementation, operations. It can also cover direct program expenses like tuition and fees, case management or navigation services, job development services. But things to remember about 100% funds is that they're capped by the federal government, and the amount that each state receives is based on a formula that involves their SNAP population. And they cannot pay for those supportive services that we call participant reimbursements. Some of those being transportation. Another one that's really important is childcare. So the important things to remember about 100% funds is that they're limited. There's only a set amount, and so they're not reliable. States have to use a lot of those funds to run the Snap Ent program. So they're really limited in what they can really offer to third-party partners. And then they're limited in what they can pay for. Next slide, please. So 50-50 or 50% funds. This is the real opportunity for colleges. They are reimbursement funds. So what that means is a provider is fronting or paying for these allowable ENT services, and then they're getting reimbursed 50% from the federal government for those allowable expenses. So again, it can cover both administrative and participant costs, and it's really flexible in how you can use them. But one thing to remember is that it's a reimbursement. So you're not awarded these funds, you're sort of approved for what you project your budget to be, what you project your expenses to be, that you'll cover with non-federal funds upfront. Next slide, please. So what is a third-party partnership? Again, third-party partners or third-party providers. This is a provider who has a contract with the SNAP agency to offer SNAP Ent services. And again, this involves this reimbursement model where they're using their non-federal dollars to offer SNAP Ent services, and then they are getting reimbursed at 50% for those services. So it's important to know that a third-party partner would be offering these services and paying for them with their non-federal funds in order to get the reimbursement. Next slide, please. So this just kind of shows the flow of funding in the reimbursement model. So going back to what we talked about with state plans, your state plan gets approved annually. The state gets their plan approved annually, and that'll include all of the sort of projected expenses and activities of their third-party providers. So then at that point, they're able to access the reimbursement that will come back down to the third-party partner upon their invoicing. So the third-party partner will submit an invoice, and then the state can access those federal funds to pass through that reimbursement to the third-party partner. Next slide. So I believe I'm going to hand this over to Bob.
And you are correct. Hi.
Thanks, Bob.
Hi, this is Bob Thibodeau. Thanks, Susan. Yeah, so, community colleges have proven to be a very valuable partner with the Snap Ent program. There's benefits to both parties, both the Snap agency, and benefits, of course, to the community college. The reason why we like to partner with with community colleges for the Snap Ent program is for many reasons, and some of the main reasons are, community colleges tend to have a good connection with the labor market within the local community. They offer a lot of programs that really connect to that labor market as far as what jobs are available and kind of the demands of the labor market in their area. They offer some programs that, of course, that put people on good career pathways. whether the individual is starting out, at the beginning of their career, they can get courses through their community college that gets them a start to get their foot in the door. But also, if they're already in a career, they have programs that can develop that career and get them moving up the ladder. Also, community colleges tend to help people that need kind of those starter programs or starter courses to get them, more ready for college. They have bridge programs, pre-college programs that can get them ready for the more upper level college courses that help them get that good job. Then, of course, colleges also begin to offer kind of work-based learning type of programs, apprenticeships, and other integrated learning models that maybe give more hands-on instruction to people that kind of learn better by actually doing than sitting in a classroom. So those are very, very important roles for colleges. Next slide. So this kind of shows how colleges kind of work with the Snap Ent program. They can either come in as an individual college that contracts directly with the state, the SNAP agency to provide ENT services, or we've seen where if a state has a fairly large or multiple colleges as part of a kind of a college board or just a group of colleges under one lead college, then that college could be an intermediary and really help provide some of the support and oversight for administrative functions that are needed for Snap Ent. They could be funded, if they're an intermediary, they could be funded with some 100% funds to help take over some of those administrative things that the state would normally do, like overseeing the contracts, taking care of putting the budgets together, and things like that would help, again, lift some of that administrative burden from the state or SNAP agency. Or they could use their own 50-50 funds to provide those services. So they would use their funds to fund the services and then receive that 50% reimbursement. We've seen this work in a lot of states where they have that intermediary model, where they have a consortium or a board, a college board that's serving in that intermediary role, and it really helps the individual colleges do what they do best in serving the participants directly. Next slide. So as far as the ENT program is concerned, there's basically two different referral processes, the way people kind of get into the program. The direct referral refers to where the individual comes to the SNAP agency and applies for SNAP benefits, and then gets, because of what the eligibility worker or the caseworker finds out through their interview with gathering information about the individual SNAP eligibility, learns that they would be a good fit for the SNAP ENT program. They eventually get referred to a ENT service provider like a college. And that really works best if there's kind of a warm handoff between the SNAP agency and the ENT service provider. The other referral model that we see is the reverse referral model. And this is where we see most of the enrollments happen within the program. And that's where the individual is entering into the program through the service provider. They're going to a college to enroll in college and try to get some services from them. And then if that college or other service provider is a contracted ENT service provider, then they can get that referral over to the SNAP agency and first verify if the individual is eligible by receiving SNAP benefits. If they're not on SNAP benefits, then they can make that referral so the person can apply for SNAP and then end up being funded through SNAP ENT. So again, that reverse referral model is really where we see most of the enrollments in the program, because the individual is there seeking services that the ENT, the service provider, is already providing. And if that individual is eligible by the fact they receive SNAP benefits and are not on TANF, then they can be funded and helped through the ENT program. Next slide. And then kind of following along and digging out a little deeper into how the person actually gets enrolled into the program. Again, the college would do their intake by looking at whether or not the person is receiving SNAP benefits, and making a determination whether they might potentially be eligible for the program. They enroll them in whatever program the person is interested in the college college curriculum, and then they would contact the state agency or SNAP agency and verify that the person is receiving SNAP. And if they're not on SNAP, again, get them referred so they can apply for SNAP benefits, and then get enrolled through SNAP ENT. And then there's an ongoing verification process that's needed, because SNAP is a program that's eligibility is determined on a monthly basis. They would have to verify on a month-to-month basis whether the person continues to be eligible, and normally do that through a billing roster or some sort of contact with the SNAP agency to get that ongoing verification. Next slide, please. So this Venn diagram is there to show kind of the elements that are involved in making kind of the perfect fit and perfect opportunity for getting the 50% reimbursement. And I'm going to go into each one of these in detail here in just a minute. But you can see, having participants, the right participants, the right capacity, funds and services, really make that kind of that sweet spot in the middle for the best opportunity for the 50% reimbursement. Next slide. So the first element is the services that the service provider is providing. And what makes a good fit for ENT is the fact that a service provider is already providing these services. We're not asking agencies or colleges that contract with the SNAP agency to provide ENT services that they create a whole new program. It's programs are already providing. And in this case, we've got education highlighted here. We know colleges, community colleges and technical colleges provide those services that already are a great fit for the ENT program. So those are kind of a no-brainer when it comes to saying, yes, these are the right services for ENT. Next slide. And then those wraparound supports that that SNAP ENT can fund. And really, this is where you really increase the chances for success for the individual by providing these support services, helping them lift those barriers that they may have had in the past to getting into college and completing courses that they need to get that good job. So things like transportation, work tools and supplies they might need for taking certain courses that they're involved in. They may need some, identification, helping them pay for tuition and fees, and then those folks that need childcare. And also clothing. Sometimes some courses require people to have safety boots or certain clothing they have to wear to be part of that course. SNAP ENT can help pay for those things as well. Next slide. And then the right participants, like Susan mentioned before, individuals that are on SNAP and not on TANF and able to work when they complete the program. SNAP ENT is really there to really help folks, students who are having, want to get started on the ground floor and get that adult basic education they need to move on into their career. Some may have had a negative experience with education in the past, a bad experience in high school, or may have gone to college before and had a bad experience. E&T can help fund kind of those extra supports they need, the college navigation or college coaching, the coaching that they need to be successful in their program they're involved in. Like I said, need that additional support to help them make them successful. Next slide. And then whether or not the agency that is contracting with the SNAP agency has that capacity to do the assessment and employment plans with the individual, whether they can track the individual's progress to make sure that they continue on a good path in making sure that they're successful. What component activities are in. We had the previous slide that showed the different components. Making sure that those are being tracked accordingly, and that any outcomes that come from that, any completions of it, certificate completions, completing their programs, we want those tracked as well. So it's good that a college or an agency contracting under Snap Ent has the capability to keep kind of track and track data and have reporting available. Next slide. And the other part of capacity is that administrative and fiscal capacity. They have to be able to kind of track those supportive services they're providing, making sure that they're managing those federal funds so that they can be ready and available for any audits or monitoring that might happen to look at their books and make sure they're managing those funds correctly. And then also budgeting and invoicing, being able to develop a budget that's meaningful and reasonable, and that they're able to do those invoicing, whether it's on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, so they can get those reimbursements, take advantage of those reimbursements that come down through this program. Next slide. And then finally, whether they have the right funds. And, these are just some examples of funds that we see that colleges can use for drawing down the reimbursement. Again, these are all non-federal funds. Any special, state worker retraining dollars that the state might provide, any low-income student supports, tuition set-aside resources, and then any other special state training funds that, target certain populations they can use for getting reimbursement for the program. Again, the key here is that they're not developing whole new programs. These are funds they're already spending on individuals. It's just a matter of identifying those individuals that are eligible for the program and taking credit for that and drawing down the reimbursement. Next slide. So I know that a lot of people that have low incomes are eligible for Pell Grants, and we know that Pell Grants are federal funds, so those would not be eligible to draw down the reimbursement. But the key is that Snap Ent can be kind of can supplement that and it could be a bridge to Pell. We know sometimes that Pell, it takes time for that to kind of kick in and start funding the individual's tuition. So Snap Ent can bridge that gap. It can also help replace, excuse me, it can't replace Pell when it's available. So there's no supplanting of federal funds. So if an individual is eligible for Pell, then that has to come first. But it can be combined with Pell to cover any additional supportive services that the individual might need, things that Pell won't pay for. And we know from past experience that sometimes a student may not be, even though they're have low income, little or no income, they may not be eligible for Pell because of, maybe have a bad history in paying student loans back or something like that, or they may be want to be enrolled in a course that's not eligible for Pell funding. Then Snap Ent can help that student. Next slide. And just to kind of leave you with some tips, we always ask or recommend that organizations, when they first start out, to start small. So for a college, that would mean maybe starting with 1 or 2 programs and then developing from there and kind of working out some of the processes and procedures to make sure that things go smoothly. Embrace the collaboration and communication with the SNAP agency. SNAP Ent is a very collaborative program. Like I said before, it benefits both parties. So it's important that they develop that good relationship and good communication to make sure the program is working the way it's supposed to work for both parties. And really integrating SNAP Ent into the existing college administrative process. There's no need, like I said before, there's no need to reinvent the process and to meet the SNAP Ent criteria. It's very flexible, so it really is a good fit for colleges. And then developing that process for eligibility verification and managing the federal funds, those are very important. And it's also important to train the staff so that everybody's aware of SNAP Ent and that so you can take advantage of the participant reimbursements and of the 50% reimbursement and take credit for all the things you're doing for SNAP Ent participants. So I'm going to turn it back over to Katie, I think, and to finish this off.
Jose, did you want to take the?
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you, Bob and Susan, for this very informational and very thorough primer on SNAP Ent. Before we move on to questions real quick, I just want to give a little bit of place setting for what's next in terms of steps and what's up the pipeline in terms of the project for ACCT. As Katie mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, there is a survey that will be coming out for interest participants. This is going to be a survey just to get a sense of the lay of the land in terms of SNAP Ent knowledge and current participation of community colleges in the program. And again, this is to inform what we're starting off with so that we can move forward and develop our technical assistance and other information that we'll need and other resources as we go through the duration of the grant project. In addition to the survey that will be coming out, we'll also be scheduling some listening sessions with potential cohort members once that's finalized. And that will be an opportunity kind of reverse to what we're doing now, where we will turn over to you all for questions and any clarifying information that you may need, but instead us get a sense of what your knowledge base is and what information we need to prepare in order to equip you or those that will be interested in participating to fully be ready to become a third-party participant if that's within the long-term plans of your institutions. For additional questions, or if there's very, very burning interest on participating in the project, you can reach out to Katie or myself. Our emails are listed on the presentation. And also for any other questions that you may have regarding the project as we move forward, like Katie mentioned, the goal is not only to assist the cohort members, but to develop by the end of it a bank of resources that can be widely shared with our community college sector to ensure that beyond the 3 years, other institutions are able to jump on board and participate in the SNAP Ent program. So I'm gonna stop right there. I'll turn it over back to Katie for any questions that the audience may have for Susan or for Bob in terms of the SNAP Ent program.
Great, thanks so much. Thanks so much, Jose. Oh my gosh, I need more coffee today. And also just echoing what you said about, thanking Bob and Susan for the thorough presentation. It's definitely, it can appear to be and is at times a complicated program. So it's great to get a primer for our community college partners. And we did get a few questions during the presentation and then some that I might tack on as well that I had that I think might be helpful. But the first question was kind of like how can community colleges get involved? And I just want to reiterate, for involvement in this particular grant, we're like we said, very much in the beginning stages. So we're welcoming interest from any institution or state system that wants to learn more about the project and consider participating. So like Jose mentioned, please feel free to reach out to either one of us and we can definitely connect with you one-on-one and give you more details and then kind of talk about next steps. But I wanted to because the question was generally posed and I kind of think it's a good thing to maybe throw out to Bob and Susan, if a community college is attending this presentation and they're thinking about, maybe they don't know kind of what the lay of the land with SNAP employment and training is in their state. Like they don't know which state agency administers the funding. They don't really know kind of where to start to find that information. who might you recommend they reach out to? Like, is it their, Health and Human Services Department, et cetera? So I'll just open that up if either of you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, typically it is the Health and Human Services Department, whatever the SNAP agency is. There are 10 states where the SNAP Ent program is state supervised, but county administered. So it could be the county office in that state that runs the program. So yeah, but if they want to contact me individually, I'll be glad to connect them with the individuals that we know in the different states that can provide that information.
Fantastic. And I had mentioned that we were gonna send around the slide deck to everyone who registered today. So I can include your contact information, Bob, in there, just in case folks want to reach
Definitely.
out.
Yep.
Great. And then we have a couple other questions related to kind of uses of the 50/50 funds. We got a question: do supportive services need to only be for SNAP participants?
Well, it has to be. Go ahead, Susan.
Well, I think you can offer supportive services to any students. However, you can only draw down reimbursement for those expenses that are tied to SNAP Ent participants. So a lot of programs don't want to create that, I guess, inequity amongst their participants if they have SNAP Ent and non-SNAP Ent participants. So they'll make sure they have a funding stream that covers for everybody, but then they can expand their capacity and bring in reimbursement for those expenses that are used for SNAP Ent participants.
Fantastic. Thanks, Susan. And then we actually got like a similar question about, can colleges use the 50/50 SNAP Ent dollars to support staff dedicated to administering the program at their college?
Yeah, absolutely. We highly recommend that, as a matter of fact. So you want to take advantage of that 50% reimbursement. Any staff that is involved directly or indirectly with supporting those participants, those eligible participants, you can claim part of their time for drawing down that reimbursement. So
I think it is important to know that you have to have a funding stream that's non-federal, that's
right,
covering those expenses initially. But one thing that is, depending on how you look at your books, it's a real opportunity that the reimbursement that comes back to you through SNAP Ent actually loses its federal quality and can be considered non-federal revenue. That can go in to further support your program. And there might be more technical questions that would get asked following from that, but sort of at the highest level, that can be seen as an opportunity as well.
Great, thanks so much. And then, as you all know, a lot of community colleges partner with their, local workforce boards and their one-stops to kind of get referrals out for education and training services. So there was a question about will the local one-stop shops be involved? And I imagine they're just looking for an explanation for how one-stops maybe fit into the SNAP Ent structure.
That's a really good question. You want to take that,
sure.
Bob? Or?
Yeah, I mean, they could be a very good source for referrals. I mean, we talk about the direct referrals. Many SNAP agencies work closely with their one-stops to help them, make those good referrals. So you can expect that if you are involved in SNAP Ent, you may get referrals from the one-stop. And some one-stops may be contracted providers as well. They may be providing some extra services. So, and they can help with case management. We know that, now under the new Farm Bill rules and everything for SNAP Ent, that case management has to be part of all the components. And we know that sometimes colleges don't have the capacity to provide that case management. So what they do instead is they partner with other agencies like one-stops to help provide that case management that's needed. So they can serve a very important role in this partnership.
I was
Oh, go ahead, Susan. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I was also just going to add that there is another national partnership grant project happening right now that is led by the National Association for Workforce Boards, and their goal is to provide technical assistance to workforce boards in order to strengthen sort of the presence of workforce boards and Snap Ent. So you might be sort of seeing that landscape kind of, I would say, just improve from the perspective of workforce boards participating in Snap Ent. And so those partnerships might be just increasing, and the opportunities for those partnerships might be increasing over time.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's a great point. I know community colleges are always kind of looking for ways to partner at the local level and kind of improve the communication there. So that's really helpful. There was a question about referral templates. So it says, are there standardized referral templates that are used for tracking? And I assume that means tracking student eligibility, or do community colleges create their own process?
I think the state agency usually offers that framework. So there isn't a standard in general, but for each state program, each Snap Ent program, they kind of have their own mechanism. In some states that's done electronically. So in some states, the provider, including the college, will have access into the state's Snap case management system. So they might be doing that process electronically, which is great. That really streamlines. Not every state has that capacity currently. So some states offer kind of a template or a spreadsheet, and they sort of lead that process and set the framework for that process.
Fantastic. And then there was a question, can local human services agencies share SNAP participant contact information with colleges for proactive outreach?
That varies from state to state. It usually depends on what their rules are as far as sharing that information. Normally, the individual will have to sign a release form in order to be able to share information. That's typically what we see, is that, if the college is a Snap Ent partner, they know they're going to need to get information from the state SNAP agency, that they would, when the individual comes in to the college to apply for a course, that they would have them sign a release form so that they can get that information they need from the state agency or SNAP agency.
Gotcha. Okay, that's really helpful. And I know you had mentioned kind of like verification and like ongoing verification. I imagine it's the case that states vary from like process to process. Like I know when the colleges are trying to verify if an individual is in fact SNAP eligible or is like their eligibility is ongoing, they reach out to the state agency and then the state agency verifies. But I imagine like the process for that is different, right? Probably from state to state.
Varies.
Yeah, we have
and
some.
then,
Go ahead.
sorry.
That's all right.
I was just going to say that often colleges are billing on a quarterly basis because that's kind of the cycle for their expenses to incur. So it may not be that they may be doing that more on the quarterly basis and making sure that that participant was eligible when that in the time period that expense incurred. But it does depend on sort of the cycle that the state sets up with the college.
Yeah, it really varies. I mean, some states have a manual process where they're sending over, rosters through email or whatever, and then, some states have a portal into their system where the college or agency would have a kind of a look-in capability where they can look to see if the individual is still receiving SNAP and not on TANF. And then there's some states that are completely automated where the college could have access to the case management system and actually, see that the person is still eligible for SNAP Ent, and then also can can manage their components and their participation in those activities. So it really depends on the state.
Okay, and we actually just got another question in along the same lines, but it says, are there any release forms current colleges use for the purpose of sharing information with the state SNAP ENT administrator? I think that was kind of along the same lines as the template, but
Yeah, it's going to vary state to state, but it's just, it's usually pretty simple wording where the individual would just sign a release form saying that the state is allowed to share information with this particular college. Usually they want to see a certain time period, on the release form, whether it be for 90 days or, whatever the time period is necessary for the college to get that information.
got it. Okay, and it's probably worth like reaching out to whoever is the state SNAP ENT administrator
Right.
in your state to see kind of like which forms and templates are being used.
Yeah, right.
And if, in your sort of onboarding process of becoming a contracted provider, it's more than likely the state's going to kind of offer all of those guidelines. And, often there might even be a handbook that includes all of those processes for the new provider. I was going to mention also one thing that can come up in the college setting is because of the student eligibility and that SNAP ENT kind of exempts you from some of those restrictions. Sometimes there can be a bit of a miscommunication, and states work with the providers, and the providers work with the state agency to make sure that there's a mechanism so that when the eligibility verification is coming through for a student, that they're not going to be told that they're not eligible because they're a student, because they're going into SNAP ENT. So there's usually a process that the state helps the provider get ahead of so that they're communicating in a way that they don't get this sort of vicious cycle that can happen. It has happened in the past where students gets submitted for verification, and then they're told, well, they're not eligible because they're a student for SNAP, but then they are because they're SNAP ENT. So states
Right.
work with the colleges to make sure that doesn't become a hurdle.
Gotcha. Okay, that's helpful. There was also a question about kind of, is there a time limit on training, or are only short-term certificate programs kind of eligible to be SNAP employment and training programs, or can it be any kind of post-secondary program?
Yeah, there's no time limit.
Okay, great. And then we also had a question about whether SNAP recipients are required to complete a work activity.
Well, being enrolled in SNAP ENT is considered a work activity. It kind of meets that definition for that individual. So
the student it's not like they would have to be working outside of their program also in addition to being enrolled.
Right, as long as they're like, for example, for an able-bodied adult without dependent, they have to participate at least an average of 20 hours a week. So they would have to be participating in that program, whatever the course they're taking, and as far as being enrolled in ENT, they would have to participate 20 hours a week at a minimum.
Got it. And just, I think there's a couple other questions here that I can follow up individually, but I think I kind of wanted to, because I know you all had mentioned the difference or kind of the potential for a college or a state system to be an intermediary versus, not just a third-party provider, because that's also very important, but just if you all wanted to give kind of a high level of the difference, like in case the community colleges on the call don't really know the different role that they could play as an intermediary versus a provider, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, you could be both. You could be an intermediary and a provider, and a direct provider. If you, in the case of like a college board or a consortium, that that agency that kind of has the oversight over all the community and technical colleges in that state would play more of an administrative role, where they would develop all the contracts or memorandums of agreement between them and the individual college. So they would hold one contract with the SNAP agency, and then they would administer the program for all the colleges. So they compile all the budgets. Basically, they would do the monitoring of all the colleges, making sure they're they're doing the right tracking and everything for the participants and all that. But again, that could be, again, a college board or a consortium, or it could be a one college, kind of a lead college that has the capacity, administrative capacity to serve that role as the intermediary. So they could both, be a provider. In other words, they're serving students, or they're tracking their own students, but then also they're kind of helping lift some of that administrative burden from the other colleges that are part of that. Kind of that group.
Fantastic. Well, I think we're just at time. So I just want to thank you, Bob and Susan, for lending us your expertise and your time, and everyone who was able to join today. Thanks so much. I just wanted to kind of plug that we'll absolutely be doing future educational events kind of in the same format, definitely a few webinars where we'll maybe take a deeper dive into some of the topics we talked about, including, reimbursement, student eligibility, and maybe some, highlighting some best practices and successful programs that have taken place at the community college level. So we really hope that this can be an ongoing project that you all can join us for, and we're just really grateful for your participation. So thanks everyone, and we'll send over the slide deck, and we'll talk to you all soon.